Well, hello. Here we are again in my cozy book nook. I'm Valerie. Today I want to tell you about 3 inspiring nonfiction books that I read in 2021. This is probably going to be the last video that I make where I talk about the books I read in 2021. From here on out, it's going to be all 2022 books, and I don't know what else. I don't really know why 2021 was such a bad nonfiction year for me, but I only picked up 9 nonfiction books last year, which is not a lot. In 2020, I read 21 nonfiction books. So that's quite a steep drop off from what I regularly read nonfiction-wise in a year. So I picked up 9 books, but I really only finished 7. 2 of them I almost got all the way through, but then ended up just not finishing them. They just weren't interesting me anymore. I do tend to focus more on fiction, but I do like nonfiction. I like to learn more about the world. I like to expand my knowledge on things. Nonfiction can be really inspirational in terms of like creating new story ideas for my writing work. I don't know if it's partly that I just forget that it exists because nonfiction books just aren't on my radar as much as fiction books. And then also nonfiction can sometimes take me longer to finish reading. And so at the end of the day, when I go to pick up a book, sometimes I just want something like really bingeable and quick. And so I pick up, the mystery novel rather than this nonfiction book about the history of octopuses or something. But I do think nonfiction definitely has its place in my life and I want to read more of it. And so I think I should set a better goal for 2022. I think I could at least read 1 nonfiction book a month. So that's going to be the goal I set for myself for this year is at least one nonfiction book a month, 12 books this year. So please, in the comments, leave me your favorite nonfiction titles, books that you have loved that are nonfiction so that I will have plenty to choose from as I move into 2022 and pick out more nonfiction to read. So of the small list of nonfiction books that I finished in 2021, 3 of them really inspired me, and those are the books that I want to tell you about today. The first one is Structuring Your Novel: Essential Keys for Writing an Outstanding Story by K.M. Weiland. I'm a writer and I've been writing novels for over a decade now, and though I feel like I have a good handle on story structure and how I like to plot and how I like to bring a story together, I do still love a good writing craft book. I think there is always something new for writers to learn no matter what stage they are in their writing journey, and I am always on the lookout for a new book that might explain a new concept or an old concept in a new way. I like finding craft books where the author maybe breaks down a concept that I'm already familiar with in a way that helps me understand it better. So with K.M. Weiland's book, Structuring Your Novel, she focuses on the 3-act structure, which is a very familiar concept to me. It is one that I use, one that I like to use in my storytelling and in my outlining. It is a very familiar concept for most fiction writers. This book wasn't necessarily bringing up a new topic for me. It wasn't necessarily revolutionary. A lot of the concepts I was already familiar with, but what I loved about it was that K.M. Weiland provided a very clear step-by-step process on understanding the 3-act structure and how to incorporate that in your own storytelling. And I don't know if it was just, maybe where I'm at in my writing journey, my writing career, the fact that I have already familiarized myself with this concept, but it was kind of the way that she talked about it was a little bit different than I had heard it talked about in the past, and I was kind of able to layer it on top of the knowledge I already had and get a better understanding of the 3-act story structure. Most of the focus in this book is on that overarching 3-act story structure, but K.M. Weiland also included scene structure and sentence structure, which I found to be very complementary to the 3-act overarching structure of the book. I liked how she kind of broke it down to yes, you have this big overarching structure, but within that structure, you also have smaller scenes that have structure. And within those scenes, you have even smaller, granular level sentences that should have structure. Though the concepts weren't necessarily new to me, I did feel like I layered on another delicious layer of storytelling frosting after reading this book. I did feel inspired to sit down and outline some stories in a new way, in a way that kind of incorporated some of the concepts that K.M. Weiland touched on in her book. After finishing this book, I did feel like I had added another tool to my story building tool belt. Maybe not adding a brand new tool so much as taking out an old one that wasn't working so well and replacing it with like a newer upgraded model. I do feel like my knowledge of story structure expanded after reading this book, and I have noticed a difference in how I have been outlining my books before I start writing them because of the concepts that I learned in this book. I'm not hitting as many dead ends, and I don't know if that's necessarily attributed 100% to K.M. Weiland's book, but I definitely did gain knowledge and much writing inspiration from this book. So if you're a writer or you're interested in writing and storytelling, maybe you're struggling with how to structure your next book, check out Structuring Your Novel by K.M. Weiland. The second nonfiction book to inspire me in 2021 is Hudson Bay Bound, 2 Women, 1 Dog, 2,000 Miles to the Arctic by Natalie Warren. This is an adventure story and a friendship story with historical and environmental and even feminist elements. It's part memoir, part travel guide. Maybe not so much as a guide as like an armchair travel book, you know, the kind where you're like stuck in your house. Maybe it's winter or maybe you just can't travel right now and you just really want to escape. Hudson Bay Bound is a great book to escape into. Inspired by the 1935 classic Canoeing with the Cree, best friends Natalie Warren and Anne Reho decided to embark on a 2,000-mile journey paddling from Minneapolis, Minnesota to the Hudson Bay. These 2 women, they were right out of college and they spent 3 months of their summer together in a canoe, battling currents, battling wind, battling mosquitoes and heat and wind. There was a lot of wind. They explored the upper Midwest into the Great Lakes and finally ending in Canada. They met all sorts of interesting people along the way. Their friendship was tested more than once. And several times I wasn't sure if they were going to make it, if the obstacles were going to be too big for them to overcome, if they were going to have to turn around and go home. Last summer, Ryan and I bought a canoe on Craigslist and we fixed it up and we have been sort of paddling it around locally in our lakes and rivers that we have near the Portland area. Once we took it out to the bay, which was pretty exciting because of the tides and the seals that were chasing us. But we haven't ever been on a big adventure like Natalie Warren and Anne went on. We have not embarked on like a 2,000-mile expedition or even like a 10-mile expedition. I think the most adventurous thing we did was we packed our canoe up and took it out to a lake where we put all our gear into the canoe and paddled it out to a campsite and stayed at that campsite for several nights. And then when we were done, we packed our gear into the canoe and paddled it back to the car. We weren't moving from camp to camp. We weren't battling currents or wind or polar bears. We didn't have to worry about getting lost. I started reading Hudson Bay Bound a few weeks after we got the canoe, and it just really inspired me to want to get out and have more adventures on the water with our boat. I don't know if I'm going to be making any really extensive, huge paddling plans this year, but I would love to do another canoe camping trip. Maybe one that's a little longer, maybe one where we move from camp to camp. We'll see. All I know is that Hudson Bay Bound inspired me to have more exciting adventures. So if you are looking for a book to inspire you in your own adventure life, definitely check out Hudson Bay Bound. The third and final inspirational nonfiction book that I read in 2021 is Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. This is actually one that Ryan and I listened to on audiobook as we were on a very long road trip from Portland to Southern California to visit family. And I think it really enhanced the experience listening to it with my partner because we were able to pause and have discussions about how this book maybe was going to affect our lives or the thoughts we had as we were listening to the concepts coming up in this book. So Cal Newport, I think he is better known for his book Deep Work. I haven't read that one yet, but I do think that both books touch on the concept of digital distraction and trying to find a balance using digital technology and how we use it or how we let it use us. I think both books also talk about finding a deeper meaning to our own lives and to the connections that we have with other people, the connections we have to our work, the connections that we have to technology. So we spent most of the trip down to Southern California listening to Digital Minimalism, and while some of it felt a little pretentious or even a little privileged, there were concepts in there that I really liked or that really made me think a little bit more about my use of technology and my use of digital media. I enjoyed enough of the concepts, even though sometimes I was like, well, that, just because somebody isn't using digital media doesn't mean their life is necessarily better. Or this idea that reading is better than scrolling, which I think it probably is. However, reading is also consumption. It's also an escape, especially if you're reading a lot of fiction and not a lot of nonfiction. I do think that there is a difference. I think reading fiction can make us more empathetic. It can kind of expand our minds with how we interact with humans. Books can also be something that you talk to people about and get into heated discussions with. So I do think that books are probably better than scrolling social media. However, the way that he was talking about it was kind of a little bit pretentious at times, a little bit like, I've never had a social media account in my life, and here's why you shouldn't either. And we all know that that's not necessarily going to happen. I mean, social media is fun, let's be honest. And I do understand the irony of me sitting here being like, we should all get off social media as I am making content for social media. This is kind of the dichotomy we live in now, where we are creating content for social media, we consume social media, and maybe it's not the healthiest way to live our lives, but we don't necessarily want to get rid of it either, because it does offer a certain level of connection. So I think my biggest takeaway with this book was not to like get rid of all my technology and live in a cabin in the woods somewhere, but rather to cultivate more of an awareness of how I'm using digital technology and how digital technology is using me, more specifically how digital technology companies are using me and my information. More than anything, I think I found that at the end of 2021, or really for the past few years, I've been letting myself go down the rabbit hole, the rabbit scroll hole, just scroll. An hour passes and I'm like, what did I just do? And I don't always feel good afterwards. I don't feel healthy. I don't feel good about myself. There's that comparison thing that you deal with when you're scrolling. You're seeing other people's highlight reels. I felt like I was trying to find connection, but I was definitely missing the mark there. I wasn't finding the kind of deep connection that I have been looking for. I really strive to be creative and to live my life in a way that gives meaning to myself and to the moments, these precious moments that we have, the short time on earth. I really want to try and like spend it doing things that light me up, things that I enjoy. And I found that instead I was more spending time scrolling through feeds, consuming content that I immediately forgot after I closed the app. So this book came at a good time for me, and a time when I was really challenging my use of digital media and how I wanted to use it moving forward. It also came at a good time for Ryan, for my partner, because he was also wanting to spend less time scrolling. So this was a good book for us to listen to, and a good book that sparked a lot of discussion between the two of us. Mainly, I think we came away with this idea that we wanted to use digital technology with more intention. So not getting rid of it entirely, but kind of trying to avoid being sucked into the endless scroll and that consumption cycle. There are good things on the internet. There are things that make our lives easier, but there are definitely toxic things on the internet too. We all know that. This is not going to turn into a video essay about the toxicity of the internet. Rather, I just wanted to share that digital minimalism was an inspiration to me in 2021. I have taken all the social media apps off of my phone. I am scrolling less. I'm also watching less TV. I'm creating more. I am connecting with my friends more. I'm connecting with my husband more. I'm reading more, but I think more than anything, my brain feels pretty content lately. It's kind of the calmest it's been in a really long time, and I do think that part of that is because I am not using social media as much. I am not falling into the scroll as often. And I find myself spending my time doing other things that are kind of refilling my creative well a little bit more than just consuming TikTok videos. That's not to say that you need to get rid of all your social media. You do you, but maybe all of us could just do a little less. So if you're sick of the scroll and you're looking for inspiration and practical tips on how to change your digital media habits, check out Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. Okay, so I'm definitely on the hunt for more interesting nonfiction. So if you read a book last year that taught you something, inspired you to change something about your life, or just thrilled your socks off, please leave your recommendations in the comments and maybe I'll make a video about it later. Thanks for watching. Stay cozy. I'll see you next time.